Tired of everyone telling you to find your passion, but no one telling you how? Welcome to the Korean Connection, and I'm your host, Korean, an attorney with a passion for empowering others to use their many talents and skills towards a path of self-discovery and alignment. Join me as I share my personal stories, professional insights, and practical tips, and how you can connect the dots between what you're great at and turning your passions into purpose. Let's connect. Push it to the left, make it go no more. Make it like no, I'm coming back home. I'm trying to roll all of my you. I'ma be the greatest, write my name in the stone. Write my name in the stone. Yeah, I'm coming back home. Yeah, I'm coming back home. Write my name in the stone. Cause I'm coming back home. Cause I'm coming back home. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me again on the Korean Connection. This week's episode, we're talking about the power of no, right? And I think, and it's in the scope of sort of having your boundaries in place, right? The power of no. And this is a subject for me it's a very difficult one. It's a very personal one for me because it's something that I personally struggle with. For whatever reason, people see me as, not for whatever reason, people see you as someone who is able in a position to render aid, someone who has information that may be of value for them, especially in this landscape of being an attorney. You're sort of like a jack of all trades, right? As an attorney, you know a little bit about a lot of things. And, people also understand what it means to be an attorney, perhaps what skills and drive it took you to even be an attorney, much less to be a successful one. So when people see you, they often feel as though you have some level of value that you can impart on them in whatever way. And this doesn't necessarily only come in a professional landscape. It comes also with your interpersonal relationships with the people that are closest to you in life. People call on you for many different reasons. And I know for me, people tend to call on me for a lot of things. Sometimes it's even just to have a conversation. Sometimes it's just to talk them off the ledge. Sometimes it's just to offer them some level of clarity. And so you find that when you are that person, people reach out. And there's nothing wrong with people reaching out. But what you come to realize after a while is that you're not able to help everyone, right? And when you fail to use the power of no, not only are you telling people that you're always readily available to take on any challenge that they throw your way, they also know that you're ready available to do whatever they ask you to do, right? And what does that mean for you as a person? If you're always saying yes to everyone, aren't you also simultaneously saying no to yourself? I mean, you have your own personal things that you're working on, right? You have your own personal goals. You have your intentionality for your day. And when someone comes and disrupt that by asking something of you that is going to require your time, you have to make a choice as to whether or not you're saying yes to that person's ask. Or are you saying no, or are you saying no to something that you need to do in order to, get your goals accomplished, right? So let's just dive into why we say yes. Why do you have the need to say yes all the time, right? For me, it's because I feel as though I do have the capacity to help. If someone calls me and say, Kareen, it could be something as simple as an attorney referral. They're going through something and they need some sort of legal help, something in the simplest form of that. They'll ask, Kareen, do you know an attorney? Or oftentimes what they'll ask me is for advice, right? Legal advice. And so generally speaking, even if I don't know all the nuances in order to handle that case, because that's not my specialty, there's some knowledge that I have that I can impart on that person that's calling that I feel compelled within myself to not withhold from them, right? Even if there's a small way in which I can help set them along their path in terms of helping them find some level of resolution, I want to be able to give that to you, right? And so Even in asking for a referral, even if I don't know someone right now in this moment, my answer is never just no, I don't know anyone. My answer is, oh, let me see if I can find someone or if I know someone who knows someone. And so, as small as that may be, it sort of like adds yet another thing to my plate because now I have to go seek out an attorney, which means that I have to go into my contacts, reach out to someone who may know someone, and then circle back. And even though it might be a small thing to do, in the grand scheme of things that I have on my plate that also are little mundane things I need to take care of, in saying yes to just finding someone a referral for an attorney, there's something that I'm saying no to that's on my original list of things to do. And so for me, my desire to want to say yes, it's simply out of the desire to want to help, because I have the information, I have the capacity to help. And so I feel compelled to help, right? And where does that, and then outside of the professional scheme of just someone asking for legal guidance, it also trickles down in your interpersonal relationships too, right? You're talking about with your family. Your family call on you and they ask you favors of you. And I don't know about you guys, but my family is large and they're all here in close proximity to me. So whenever there's something that needs to be done, I'm one of those persons who's going to get those calls. And, if it's hard to say no to strangers, it's even harder to say no to family, right? And even harder than saying no to family, it's even harder saying no to your kids. And it's even harder saying no to your partner, right? Because you love them and, you want to be able to feel like you're giving more of the people who are closer to you than those people that can just pick up the phone and ask for a referral. So you feel, for me anyway, I feel some sense of obligation to the people who is even closer to me to be able to be available in order to render assistance whenever they need. But the problem is when you want to be everything to everyone, when does it end? Where do you draw the line to say no? If you don't know to say no and understand that no is a full, complete sentence, you're going to keep on saying yes to everyone. And when you say yes to everyone, all that leaves you with is just a sense of depletion, right? And, that saying that says you can't pull from an empty cup, you can't pour from an empty vessel. When you give everything of what you have to other people, whether it be small or big ways, you leave yourself nothing for you to accomplish the goals that you need to accomplish. And so in this episode, I want to focus on your power of saying no. Now, this is something that it came to me very, very recent in my life. I never really viewed, my inability to say no as a derailment of some sort. I just always was just worried. And it wasn't necessarily a thing about being well-liked also, because I feel that I'm a very confident person. I don't feel as though I necessarily seek validation from people. But there's something there, right? There has to be something there where you feel as though you have to be the person to provide value to everyone that's in your life, right? And what you realize is that it's not that you can't provide the value, but you also don't need to be the only person in everyone's life to provide that value. You'll find that people can operate just fine without you than with you. And that is something that you have to come to a realization that you are not the end all be all to everyone. If you say no, people will simply just find someone else who will say yes. Or better yet, do the thing themselves or figure it out. Because you also learn that when you keep on saying yes to people, you're developing very bad habits, not only for yourself, but you're developing bad habits for the people around you. Because what are you teaching the people around you? If they can simply just call you and know that they're always going to say yes, you're always going to say yes, what prevents them from picking up the phone? It doesn't take as much thought as you think it does for people to ask favors of you, right? They're not sitting there pondering like, oh my God, Kareen is so busy. And I know if I call her, it's going to take her off the path of what she needs to do. And I know she has those two children over there that's running her ragged. And she's, she has a full-time job. And no one is over there considering all that's on your plate. No one. All they're considering is what's on their plate and the issue that's facing them and the quickest way to find a resolution. And so if you are the quickest path to them finding a resolution, where do you think they're always going to go? They're always going to come to you because one, you have no boundaries enough to say no. You're going to say yes, and their issues get resolved. Who wouldn't pick that option, right? And so you being on the other end, you're probably the one thinking, oh my God, they asked me to do this thing and I have so much to do. I don't know. And you're the one sitting there stressed out because all the things that you have on your list are getting deferred or denied or delayed. And you can't seem to find the time in a day. And before you know it, it's time to, the day's ending, right? The day's done. And not only is the day done, you're exhausted. You're exhausted. And from doing what? From prioritizing other people's needs above that of your own, right? So let's talk about just that. When you say yes to everyone, how can you connect your passions to purpose? It's literally impossible, right? Because every time you say yes to someone, think about it. What happens? You have to literally stop what you're doing. You have to take time out of your schedule to do it. And if you're somebody like me, you're doing it immediately, right? So if someone is calling you in an emergency, you're picking up the phone. So what does that mean? It means that whatever it is that I was in the process of doing, whatever you called me for takes precedence over that. Whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it had to do with my children. It doesn't matter if it had to do with my health. It doesn't matter if it had to do with like a deadline that I'm facing. All I start to think about is assisting you through this crucial moment that you're going through. And think about that for a second. When you can prioritize everyone over yourself and your needs, is that self-love? Are you respecting yourself as an individual when you're able to put yourself and things that are important to you on the back burner to everybody else's dreams and problems, right? And, especially, being an attorney, people are never really coming to you with good news, right? They're always coming to you with something that is very traumatic to them, something that they themselves don't know how to navigate. And it's very hard for you to not to take that on, especially when it's someone that you know, right? And more than likely it's not going to be a stranger that's picking up the phone to call you at the midnight hour to have you help them solve the problem. This is someone who's going to be very well connected to you. That's going to be able to pull at your heartstrings, right? And so when you just drop everything in the middle of what you're doing in order to answer that call, it's almost like you take on that person's problem. Because for me, now, even though I've spoken to you, I've stopped doing what I'm doing, I've spoken to you, I've given whatever guidance that I have, there's usually some sort of action plan in terms of next steps. And it's either an action plan in terms of what you need to do or action plan in which I'm going to be able to help provide you additional support, right? If you need it. And that sort of derailment, even if it's small, it's impactful. And what happens throughout the day is that in the end, you end up feeling so exhausted that you have no time to consider anything that you want to do. And where does that leave you? When you're so depleted from pursuing your dreams, when you're so overwhelmed and tired and tapped out from doing everything else for everyone, every task that everyone asks you to do literally takes you off your path of alignment, right? If you don't take those intentional steps that you need to take in your life in order to connect the dots between your passions and your purpose, if you don't sit down and take some intentionality and prioritize those things, it will never happen, right? And when you prioritize other people's needs, you're deprioritizing you. And that is something that I had to come to grips with very, very recently. In fact, I can tell you safely, I would not be here with you on the Korean Connection if I didn't start that journey just maybe a short few weeks ago. I'm talking about in the month of April, right? It really got to a breaking point for me where I just could not do anything else. I just kept on adding more things onto my plate. And I justify this so many ways, just like some of you probably justify this in your life as well. You know that saying, jack of all trade, master of none. That phrase resonates with me so much because I'm always doing so much. And I feel like, it makes me such a well-rounded person. And, it just means that I have flexibility to juggle all these things. And I know how to multitask. And it's just recently I realized that no, girl, it's not multitasking. It's just you doing a lot of things you don't see to the end. Because it's impossible to see anything through when you're doing a bunch of different things, especially things that's not even aligned with your ultimate purpose, right? And so I always kind of gave myself a pass, like, oh no, I just always want to be busy and doing a lot of things. But those things weren't necessarily in alignment with me. Those things weren't necessarily in alignment with my ultimate goals and my ultimate passion. So in connecting your passion to purpose, you have to be intentional in deciding where you can say no, deciding when you can say yes, deciding where do I need to start including these boundaries in my life, right? Until you do that, you're going to feel stagnant. Until you do that, you're going to feel as though you're going to feel, that sense of self-worth, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of just knowing, that sense of fulfillment that you're seeking. It's going to be so delayed because, as much as you're going to get some semblance, don't get me wrong, you're going to get some semblance of, satisfaction from helping others. But because you're not aligned with your specific, unique path, that sense of fulfillment isn't going to come because you're the only one that knows all the things that you left on the table in order to say yes to this person and that person, right? So how did I come to the realization that I needed to set more boundaries in my life? Well, it started out with just this angst of frustration, right? Because for me, being stagnant is one of the worst feelings. And I just kept feeling stagnant. I was doing a lot of things, but I didn't feel any sense of progression because the things that I was doing, even though there were a lot, I wasn't aligned with them. They weren't pushing me closer to what my ultimate goals were. And so what did I do? Well, I discussed it with my therapist, right? And told her, all the things that were happening, all the things that I have going on and how burnt out I was. And through her, she was able to tell me, this jack of all trade thing that you think you have going on, this flexibility that you feel like you have to just sort of do everything at once and be a jack of all trade, it's not really a thing. You have to prioritize the things that you want to do within your own life, right? And be intentional about the order in which you do things. You have to take one thing at a time, be intentional about that one thing, see it to completion before you tackle the next thing. And that was like a huge thing for me, right? Being able to prioritize the task that I had. But prioritizing the task was one thing. Okay, now you know what you need to do first. But guess what? Once I started doing that, guess what? The phone calls come. Throughout the day, my friends would make phone calls to me. hey girl, what's going on? Because why? They're in the middle of their day. They're either on their commute to work, they're on their lunch break or breakfast break, they are, on their commute home. So they're calling me at times when it's convenient. But for me, especially because I work from home mostly, it's not convenient at all. It's literally in the middle smack of my day. And, even though I've prioritized, worked so hard to like be intentional and prioritize these tasks, the derailment comes from all these external forces of people just needing me. And I realized that I have broken my friends so bad that they feel as though they can call me at any hour, that, instead of being resentful, I really had to come to terms with that. It was my lack of boundaries. It was my lack of self-respect that gave people the notion that I'm just available all the time, right? How I had the intentional steps that I had to take in order to not be so available to everyone. I literally had to tell myself, Kareen, 2 phone calls for the day. 2 phone calls. That was it. You're allowed to take 2 phone calls for the day. And I had to be intentional about those 2 phone calls. Who are those 2 phone calls were going to be, right? So if my kid's school happened to call out of the blue, that's one of the phone calls I'm obviously going to take, right? Or if it's a call that I got, before my workday starts, okay, that's a phone call that I can take because it doesn't derail me from my list of things that I've prioritized. Or I can take a phone call when I'm on a natural break and that phone call happened to come, or I need to follow up on something that transpired or a missed call that I had. I can be intentional about the phone calls and the interactions that I have throughout the day. Setting boundaries for yourself is imperative in you connecting your passions to purpose. If you have no boundaries at all, you're going to fall victim to everyone. Everyone. You're going to fall victim to wanting to see everyone's goal progress outside of your own. And so in me just doing those 2 things, prioritizing my goals and also creating that boundary, those are 2 very crucial things. Those are like the things that got me here, sitting here in front of you in such a short space that I was able to accomplish this is amazing just by doing those 2 things. And what happened after I did those 2 things? Just creating the boundaries for my friends. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me to do. And it wasn't easy for my friends to accept. In creating boundaries for yourself, there is gonna be resistance to the people who you failed to create boundaries for this entire time. They are going to have to acclimate to this new set of boundaries that you have instilled in yourself and your life. And it's your responsibility to effectively communicate these boundaries to your friends. So I had to tell my friends that called me every day for the past 20 years that no, I cannot take your call. They had to get used to missed calls and hearing my voicemail or getting the text to say, I can't speak right now. And trust me, that was met with some level of resistance. People started getting in their feelings. Oh, so now you're busy, and I called you 3 times this week and I didn't get you, or I'm not going to call you back because I called you 3 times and you never hit me back. So, I didn't even realize that I hadn't hit the person back, and they were over there in their mind making intentional decisions not to call me back because I hadn't returned the call. I mean, all of these sort of responses that you get are resistance to you creating boundaries. But it's imperative on you to have boundaries. As individuals, you need to have boundaries, right? And it is also your responsibility to teach people your boundaries. If you don't have any boundaries, people won't respect anything about, how you value your time. Time is so valuable. Your time is so valuable, right? Because your ultimate goal is to feel that sense of fulfillment, whether that be in a small way, in fulfillment in knowing that you were productive throughout your day, or that sense of fulfillment to know that you were fulfilled throughout your life's journey. Fulfillment is what we're all seeking. So, in order to be able to be intentional about the things that you're doing within your life and getting to that sense of fulfillment, it starts with you telling people what your boundaries are and you know, being respectful of your time. And don't equate your respect for yourself and valuing your time with disrespecting others. There's nothing wrong in you saying no, right? You telling someone no and their reaction, if it's a visceral reaction to you saying no, that tells you a lot of things, one, about that person. One, it tells you a lot of things about you as well. It tells you about your lack of boundaries, that you're able to sustain this relationship with someone that are incapable of hearing you say no. Think about that, right? If you're unable to say no to this person who's been such a staple in your life, or even not a staple in your life, the audacity of them to feel as though your no is unwarranted, and or the fact that you were able to sustain that relationship for that long without saying no is very telling, right? And so when you start instituting those boundaries and witnessing the people's reaction, one of two things is going to happen. Is either they're going to start respecting you for the boundaries that you've created and understand the value in the relationship and maintaining that relationship, or they can take the no that you're going to get and take it in a whole nother direction, right? And make it like sort of a toxic response. Either way, you're still on your path of alignment and towards connecting your passion to purpose. And is either they're going to come around and realize that, no, this is just someone who just have respect for themselves. And I need to also understand that time has value and their time has value to them, or not. Or you may just end up losing out in that relationship. But who do you think should be the one to bear the blunt of that, right? Do you think that you should be the one to sacrifice self in order to maintain that relationship? Or it's perhaps best that that person understands the value of you, right? I think the latter. I think the person needs to understand the value of you. And I think the value is understanding and respecting your time more so than, being liked by other people. How do I rationalize the guilt of saying no? Because when you say no, you feel guilty about it, right? Because you feel as though there's a sense of disappointment in that person. But I rationalize the no because I rather disappoint you than disappoint myself, because I have to live with myself. I have to live with all the disappointments of all my unrealized dreams, the disappointments of unrealized fulfillment, of finding and using my passion. That is how I get over the guilt of saying no, not using someone's external pressures to have power over my life. And so in saying no, not that I don't feel guilt, but understanding that guilt is just a feeling that is fleeting, right? And once you take that intentional step to say, I am choosing me over you, that's how you deal with the guilt of saying no. And so, guys, in sort of wrapping up this episode of the power of no, I want to empower you to understand that no is a complete sentence. I want you to understand that in saying no, every time you say no to someone else's desires, you are saying yes to aligning your passions to purpose. Every time you say no to someone, you're staying in a path of alignment, right? And not only that, you're teaching people how to respect your boundaries. Because if you don't tell people what your boundaries are, they won't have any for you, right? And having boundaries for yourself is the ultimate level of self-love and self-respect that you will ever have for yourself. And I'm telling you guys, as soon as you start implementing these strategies of prioritizing your goal and being intentional about your boundaries and understanding the power of no, you will see that connecting your passions to purpose is going to happen that much quicker that you're going to say, why haven't I done this before? So do that, guys. Exercise the power of your no. And join us next time on the Korean Connection. Thank you, and let's connect. Thank you guys for connecting with me today. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to my channel, The Korean Connection. To connect with me, you can email me at thekoreanconnection@gmail.com. And don't forget that sometimes your passion whispers before it roars. And if you're listening closely, the next episode might be where it gets louder. Let's connect. Push it to the